call that I'm very proud of is I got a call from a mother who had a baby that wasn't breathing, and she was very hysterical. We got her to calm down, and once she calmed down, we performed CPR on the child, and the best thing I've ever heard was the child crying, and that was the most exhilarating feeling I've ever had.
Every minute of every day, Americans rely on public safety's hidden heroes, our 911 emergency call takers. From fires and floods to car crashes and heart attacks, 911 professionals are our first responders, handling more than 240 million calls for help each year.
Working in 911 is stressful, but if I can help someone, that gives me the joy of being able to walk out of the department with my head up high. It's the best feeling ever.
America's 911 system has made incredible progress over the last 50 years. From the days of rotary phones and copper wires, to wireless phones, to those powerful little computers that fit in our pockets. Through all of this change, 911 has always been there. But just like many of our roads and bridges, America's 911 infrastructure is showing its age. Technology is evolving rapidly. Cyber threats are growing. It's time to modernize 911 and provide our first responders with the tools they need to keep us safe.
Anywhere, anytime, any device, I want to be able to help people.
On the 50th anniversary of 911, we're celebrating how far we've come and how much more we need to do to advance 911 in the 21st century.
America's 911 professionals are the unsung heroes of public safety, working tirelessly under stressful conditions, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Let's thank them for everything they've done.
And let's commit ourselves to doing everything we can to give them the tools and the resources they need to protect our families, our communities, and our country.
Show your support for the 911 professionals in your community and learn more about Next Generation 911. And happy 50th anniversary, 911.
So today we're going to have demonstrations throughout the day and presentations from 10 leading providers in the communication space and in the 911 industry. And it'll, I think, be an interesting discussion on 911 location issues, Next Generation 911, RealTime Text capabilities, and other different technologies that are making our 911 system even better than it already is. But before we get to that, it's now my pleasure to introduce Representative Greg Walden to kick off this year's 911 Technology Showcase. Representative Walden, who represents Oregon's 2nd Congressional District, is the chair of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Prior to that, he was chair of the Communications Subcommittee and is a recognized leader on communications issues and certainly no stranger to 911, having overseen multiple hearings in which 911 has been a topic of discussion and public safety communications writ large. And most recently, he helped work with his colleagues to ensure that consumers can access emergency services, I think it was last week actually, by ensuring the passage of Kerry's Law to ensure that folks can access 911 by dialing only 911 from any communication service, including multi-line telephone systems. So please join me in welcoming Chairman Greg Walden.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be with you. Thank you for what you do out in our communities and across our country. I want to thank my colleagues, too, Anna Eschu and John Shimkus, that have been real leaders in the effort to improve the federal policy and provide great support for the 911 community. And they've done amazing work over the years. I got to see the phone back here, the original phone. How fitting. It was two politicians calling each other, calling it an emergency. Made the first call, right? Yeah, we're pretty self-important here. Just saying. Look, I had the opportunity to tour my local PSAP the other day in my hometown of Hood River and get an update kind of what they're facing. I'll talk a little bit about that in my remarks. But my wife and I were in the radio business for 21 years, owned and operated small market radio stations. And while there are a lot of pretenders in Congress, I'm actually, I think, the only licensed ham, amateur radio operator. So I've been around the first responder community for a long time in the real profession I had. I was a journalist in the radio business. And I would guarantee you the other thing, too, I'm the only one that's ever chaired the Energy and Commerce Committee who has actually wired in an emergency broadcast system. because I also pretended to be an engineer from time to time. So we had the emergency alert systems and in 5 radio stations we had. So spent a lot of time with the emergency services community and really appreciate what you do day, night, and in the course of the emergencies, floods and fires have been partners in my other life in the broadcast business. So I'm really honored to be with you as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the first 911 call. We've moved a lot closer to the goal of making sure everybody in America is connected. We did that in terms of making sure every 911 call goes through, as was referenced by Patrick, with passage by the House and the Senate of Kerry's Law. This legislation, as you probably know, is named for a Texas mother who was murdered by her estranged husband in 2013. It would require that any multi-line telephone system connects directly to 911 when dialed, even in instances where the phone requires the user to dial 9 to get an outside law. It was Carrie's 9-year-old daughter who tried to call 911 from a hotel phone as her mother was being murdered, but didn't realize she had to dial 9 first. To be honest, I'm not sure a lot of people would know they'd have to do that, especially in the moment. Her grandfather was for the committee when we took up this issue, and it's just such a heartbreaking tragedy, and it could be prevented, and it will be prevented going forward. So Kerry's Law is now law, and we're proud that that bill made it all the way through the process. You'll probably be pleased to know, too, yesterday we included language of Congresswoman Eshu's legislation to set up an FCC proceeding to provide even more detailed 911 operators or detail to 911 operators from multi-line telephone systems. So, you know, if you place a 911 call here in this building, great, you're on a street location, but we don't know where you are. And it's kind of a big and confusing building if you've tried to navigate around it. So we're trying to overcome that hurdle as well. And I'm very pleased this is part of the Ray Baum Act that we passed out of the committee yesterday. And I very much appreciate you expressing your support for the Ray Baum Act to the House floor. It's named after our former staff director and dear friend of mine who passed away last Friday in a long battle with cancer. He was our staff director on the committee, public utility commissioner, and chairman for the state of Oregon and legislator. And so I think it's fitting, given all his work in telecommunications, that the committee came together and named both the reauthorization of the Federal Communications Commission, which, by the way, hasn't been done in a quarter of a century, and some of these other issues after him. As I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I was in my hometown of Hood River, Oregon, and met with the sheriff and the dedicated people that man the center there. And it really helps to get firsthand when you're in a policy-making situation like we are, to get here firsthand what's working, what's not, what's the cost of the new software that's going out into these centers, how's that going to be managed, what are the communications issues. As someone who played a key role back in 2012 of moving forward with FirstNet and freeing up the spectrum and helping pay for the first interoperable public safety broadband network in the country, we want to make sure it's going to work. And one of the concerns that the local sheriff had was, would there be the build out of the cell sites by the FirstNet provider, AT&T? And so I took that back. Within a day, we had a good answer back out into the rural areas of Oregon about where these new sites would be and the kind of density and coverage that would exist. Because if we don't have coverage out there, then the whole thing doesn't work. And so we're moving forward on a lot of these fronts to make sure that we have coverage where we need it. We're continuing on the Energy and Commerce Committee to the next 50 years look and helping make sure communities can fully realize Next Gen 911. A few years ago, as I said, I worked on the Next Gen 911 Advancement Act back in 2012. That became part of public law as part of the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act. NTIA and NHTSA will soon be distributing $110 million in grants across the country in order to update our call centers and 911 systems. So as we make the switch from the old circuit switched infrastructure to one that's entirely IP-based, I want us to make sure that we improve interoperability and resiliency. As you know, federal funds are scarce, so we must be vigilant with states to counter any fee diversion. That is an issue we are paying closer and closer attention to. I've always believed that if you ask somebody for their money for a purpose, it should go for that purpose and not be diverted. The funds can help us innovate as we move toward new 911 technologies, devices, and services. So we want to be a partner in facilitating that transition to next-gen 911, helping communities overcome the challenges of deployment, clearing the way for cutting-edge technology to help save lives. And the red phone that's on display back here is an important piece of history. We were kind of laughing about if millennials understood why there are holes in the clear plastic part that's round. I thought that was an improvement when they went to clear plastic. You know, I remember the old metal ones. Well, we started with the tin can and the string thing, but having received the first 911 call in, is it Haleyville, Alabama? Is that right? On February 16th, 1968. It's pretty amazing. Thanks for letting me play with that a little bit. Now, I didn't take it out of the box. I didn't rewire it. I didn't do anything like that. But it's an important part of our history. And you think about, prior to that, there was no thing called 911. Or the other 11s that now have come about, and how our lives have changed, and changed for the better. So we're pretty excited about the future. And this event, this is the 911 Institute's annual tech showcase, and so I'm intrigued by what's on display here. But foremost, we just are partners. Think of us as partners trying to continue to make improvements in America's emergency services opportunities and challenges, and whether that's making spectrum or funds available, we're here to do both and get the policy right so we can save lives and you can do your jobs, and we really appreciate what you do. Thank you very much. God bless you, and have a great conference.
Okay, good morning. Again, Doug Kessler from Comtech. Again, talk lessons learned in next generation 911. This is going to be based upon essentially, is it going to, next slide. Oh, there we go. So we're going to talk about next generation 911, but before we do that, I want to just level set with everyone, make sure we're all on the same page. Next generation 911, the various network elements. I'm going to go through this quickly, not going to read everything, explain everything. For this particular presentation, I want to talk about a little bit of governance, a little bit of NG core services, a little bit of EZNet, and some of the operational challenges we've seen. So I thought we were in DC, so I thought it'd be great to have a quote from a great general and maybe modify that quote a little bit. So in preparing for next generation 911, I've always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. So that's very important. Next generation 911, there's a large component of this that is about planning. And planning for a migration from a legacy system to an IP system is a big change. This is important because planning is an activity. That's a verb, right? You need to continue to modify your plans. It's not a document. You look at it and it's static. That's a key component of this presentation. There we go. There we go. Perfect. Every deployment's going to be different. Organizational authority, chain of command is very important. Making sure you have regulatory authority at your jurisdiction when it comes to next generation 911 is critical. And then the last thing is the gathering of information prior to an RFP, prior to an actual deployment of next generation 911 is very critical. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go. I couldn't have a presentation without a network diagram. That's just who I am. So next generation 911 for this particular presentation is made up of 4 components. I've grouped them into 3. The first is the communication service providers, the carriers that ingress to the next generation 911 network. In the middle is your next generation core services and ESINet. I've grouped that into 1. And the last thing are the PSAP connections from the next gen core services, ESINet into the PSAP. Emergency Services IP Network. Thank you. I assume everyone knows that, but that's a bad assumption. Carrier ingress. This is probably one of the biggest challenges with next generation 911. You have to ingress all the carriers within your particular region into the next gen 911 network. That's all. So I say this could be anywhere from tens to upwards of 100 carriers. So in the state of Iowa, next gen 911 is provided by Comtech. There are more than 100 carriers in the state of Iowa. They all need to ingress into that next generation 911 network. It's a lot of work. Yeah, so as part of that, you need to get their authorization to do that, essentially force them to interconnect to these points of ingress. You have to come to a design agreement. You have to make sure that everyone's on the same page with where they're going to interconnect and how they're going to interconnect. And many times you run into these carriers and you ask them about 911, and the guy who connected 911 back in 1982 retired. So they don't even know who the person is. They don't have service order codes in their systems for 911. It can be a real challenge. Let's talk about the next gen core services and ESINet. Oop. So during this migration of next gen 911, you need to essentially support two networks. You need to support two networks from the carrier into the next gen core services environment. So a legacy network to the selective router, and an IP network into next gen core services environment. Same thing holds true for PSAPs. You need to essentially have PSAPs interconnected to the next gen 911 network. You have to have PSAPs that are interconnected to the legacy selective router. There are two networks in parallel that need to be supported during the migration. So a couple of things to point out here. The red line that goes up there, those are inter-tandem trunks. Those inter-tandem trunks are something that is not supported today typically. You need to turn those up in order to support next gen 911 migration, and then you need to support that for transferring out of your next gen 911 network to a legacy network. That's increased cost, increased time, and these are things that jurisdictions really need to be aware of when they sign up for next gen 911. The migration of carriers in particular can take upwards 6 months to 18 months, depending on how many there are, the complexity. It's a long process. PSAP side of the house here. When we look at RFPs, many times we'll see where a jurisdiction will say, we want 10 megabits carrier diverse connections into each and every one of our PSAPs. It sounds great, but it's costly to do that, especially if it's a 2-seat PSAP. 20 megabits of bandwidth into a 2-seat PSAP or a 3-seat PSAP is what we call overkill, right? So there are things that jurisdictions need to really understand when they design and they put requirements into an RFP when it comes to those kinds of things. The other thing is diversity. Just because you ask for carrier diversity doesn't mean you have access network diversity, meaning the copper that runs down the street, even though you have carrier diversity, they could be running across the same sheath of copper down a street. So a backhoe that cuts into that piece of copper can take down both AT&T, CenturyLink, Verizon, whoever it might be, because they're running across that same piece of copper. Last thing I'm going to say is text to 911. So with text to 911, just because you have next generation 911 and you have an ESINet, not all those PSAPs are going to be i3 capable at that particular time. They may not have i3 capable CPE. Therefore, you might have to support a web-based system until you get your i3 call handling system upgraded. And I'm going to run through these observations real quick. This is kind of a miscellaneous catch-all for some other observations. We're seeing tariffs being used in place of RFPs, just another method of actually procuring next-gen 911. We're starting to see, thankfully, carriers ingress SIP, Session Initiation Protocol, into the next-gen 911 environment. Up until recently, it was always a TDM-based ingress into the network. Location. I see these articles all the time. I want to see, how many people see the articles where it's like, oh, we have next-gen 911, our location's going to be better. It's really a misnomer. And we need to make sure people are aware that just because you have an next-gen doesn't mean that you're going to have better location. And last thing, not necessarily tied to next-gen, but I wanted to make a point here is that we're still working to get text to 911 transfers through the Text Control Center standardized. It's not there, so West and Contact need to put together proprietary methods of doing that. And the one last thing I want to say is on the carrier ingress side, it would be very nice to see some structure, some methods of how carriers are required to provide ingress into a next generation 911 network. So with text to 911, a jurisdiction can go and say to the FCC as an example and say, I want text to 911 service. That filters down to all the carriers. People like Comtech and West will then turn up that particular jurisdiction with text to 911. Nothing like that exists for next gen 911 right now, and it'd be nice to see something for that capability. That's all I have. I think I'm right in about 9 minutes. So I have about a minute for a question or two, if there are any questions. Okay, well, oh, sure, yes. Well, tariff, if jurisdictions do decide to go down a path of tariff, it allows for an easier method of getting next generation 911 up and running, meaning you don't have to go through the RFP process. You don't have to build an RFP, you don't have to go through, have a consultant get a bunch of information or data or whatever it might be to build the RFP. A tariff, you can just essentially go to people like Comtech or whomever and say, we want a tariff for next gen 911. We can establish a tariff within that jurisdiction or state, and the jurisdiction can then buy off that particular tariff. This is my personal opinion. The one challenge with a tariff is it could create fragmentation within a particular market, right? So if a state says we want to do tariffs, and you have 5 tariffs, in theory, you could end up having 5 next-gen 911 systems all within that jurisdictional area. So that can lead to interoperability challenges. We all know that it's a network of networks, but still interoperability is a big issue, a big challenge. Yes, sir. Those are the two that come to mind, actually. In Pennsylvania, I know they've built tariffs for IP selective router services. In Western PA, called Region 13, on the west side of Pennsylvania, they went through a tariff to get some next-gen services there. But California, Colorado, Pennsylvania, I know for sure have done that. Yeah. Okay. All right, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Tony Dunn, and I'm with Hamilton. And this is April Hines, and she's with InDigital. And we're here to briefly talk to you a little bit about one of the newest things that we are integrating into the 911 system, and that is RealTime Text.
Okay, what is RealTime Text? RealTime Text is automatically transmitted to the PSAP at the same time the texter is texting. I mean, that's what that all says in a very brief manner of saying it. But the one thing that I need to point out is that it also has a voice component to it. So it's not just text, it's also voice with the text. All right. When did RealTime Text come about, and why are we talking about it? Well, back in 2016, the FCC adopted a report and order that allowed the carriers to provide real-time text in lieu of TTY. And the report and orders are up there if you want them, but it's going to be done in a graduated manner. In that graduated manner, the very first hurdle has actually already come to fruition. So in December of 2017, the carriers are now, the big 4 carriers, I need to make sure you understand that, the major carriers can now provide RTT in either a downloadable app or at least one of their devices that has real-time text embedded as an embedded solution. In December of 2018, the phone manufacturers must include an embedded solution in all new devices. And then when you move on to December of 2019, the big 4 carriers must provide, all of their devices must have it inherent on their operating systems. In June of 2020, the smaller carriers then have to be able to provide the app and or the minimum of 1 phone. And then in June of 2021, the small carriers will have to have the same accountability as the major carriers, providing it in all of their phones. Now that's you.
So you might be wondering, why are we doing RTT when we've got TTY and we've got SMS, and why now are we going to add another layer or another component to getting text messaging into a 911 center? So first of all, it's important to understand that TTYs are very, very old technology. Back in World War II, the Baudot component was designed, and TTYs were built in the early 60s. And there's a lot of issues related to that old technology, especially when we're trying to integrate that into now what we're moving to is the next gen platform. And so SMS then was designed to, because more and more people are dropping the usage of the TTYs to having their smartphones, and they just want to text back and forth with the smartphones. And so SMS became something that we needed to pay attention to because that's what our citizens are using. But that's always been viewed as an interim solution for folks to be able to text back and forth. RTT was designed to replace TTYs. It's a platform that can be used over the next gen network, and TTYs not so much, right? So there's some differences between RTT and TTY that I just wanted to point out. First of all, TTYs are very not only old, but they're very slow. With they're Baudot with a baud rate of 45.5, that makes it just very slow typing. And being able to get that message into 911 when it's slow it could be critical. It could be life or death. So RTT is referred to as basically fast. It's a fast mode, and it is real time. So when somebody is hitting a key in real-time text, it's being received at the same time, at the end user's time. So it's full duplex, meaning, well, let me go back to TTY. TTY is half duplex, meaning only one person can type at a time, and you have to wait for the other person to stop typing before you can send a message. And so in RTT mode, it is simultaneous, so you don't have to wait. You don't have to give the GA for the go-ahead, and a lot of the abbreviations that you have to use in a TTY mode. Usability, meaning that you can interrupt. You can, in a TTY mode, you can't. So it's user-friendly. And it does have the voice component, and eventually when carriers are able to then move videos and networks across the network, the RTT can support that as well. And let's see. Compatibility, April mentioned the plan, of when every device is going to have the capability, and so it will be compatible across devices. So why is it important to me or you? Is because now that's going to make it available to, RTT will be available to every single person, and regardless of disability. It's not just for people with disabilities, it'll be for everybody, just like SMS turned out to be. The disabilities community advocated for SMS because they were not using their TTYs, and now they are very, very excited that RTT is going to become available to them instead of even SMS. So they're looking at that as a very positive thing for communications.
Okay. Yep. Actually, I was going to just kind of address that, but thank you, Patrick. Actually, where RTT is concerned, it is something you are actually going to have to go into an application or into it's going to be an app on the phone no matter what it is, whether it's inherent on the device or if it's actually an over-the-top app. One thing that I think is really important to point out regarding RTT as PSAPs, how many of you in here are PSAPs right now? Okay. RTT, you're going to receive RTT right now. So if somebody sends an RTT message, you're already going to be receiving it. One of the biggest issues, and we're going to talk about that in just a second, is the fact that it's backwards compatible. Excuse me, backwards compatible to TTY right now. So if you receive RTT, you're really not going to know it's an RTT. It's going to come in as a TTY into your PSAP. But as we talk about this, there are issues with backward compatibility. And some of those drawbacks, Tony mentioned, were the Baudot conversions. just as text to TTY has issues, RTT to TTY is also going to have issues. It's not going to truly be real time at the PSAP. The user is still going to have to wait for the PSAP. The PSAP's only going to see one side of that RTT coming in at this point. In addition, do you want to go next? Do you want me to just go ahead? Okay. So another problem with this is the issue with real-time text right now, and nobody has really identified this. We're kind of seeing this right this minute. Is that the deafblind, and hard of hearing communities typically only have a data plan on their phones. Well, there's a voice component to RTT. So when they place a call, because it is a call to 911 using RTT, that call goes through because the FCC requires that all 911 calls go to a PSAP, no matter if you have a non-initialized phone or not. But the issue is if the call is dropped, the PSAP cannot call the person back. So there will be no voice component. Now, if they have text to 911 and they have outbound capabilities, then they can text that caller back. But otherwise, there are some major concerns there. So that is something that we are actually addressing within our RTT platform. And that is next. And we're going to invite up James Kinney, who is our Chief Innovations Officer, and he's doing our demos over here, and he's going to talk a little bit about the actual platform and how it works.
Hello. Going to be a little brief here since we have short on time, but very high-level overview. We've integrated what's a piece of software from Hamilton Innovations called the Plug. It's a TTY to RTT transcoder, and it allows us to enable our platform to do RTT immediately. So what we've done is we've taken our previous JStandard 110 text to 911 platform and converted it to support RTT and text to 911, and we can give you a demo at any time if you need over here. And I guess probably best thing would be to take any technical questions that you might have. And you want to go to the next slide, too?
I will, but I want to point out just real quick that one of the things that you're going to have to do if you want to receive RTT directly is that you're going to have an RTT platform in the PSAP. And that's something that, obviously you don't have right now. So.
Yeah, to that regard, most of the NG911 PSAP providers are expected, when they do converged multimedia, to support RTT and MSRP directly. But in the interim, and when we're working in JStandard 110 interim, we have some fragmentation, if you will, and the text platform that we have here can be enabled to do RTT immediately, as an example. Gotcha. Is there any questions, technical or other? I think we're running low on time, so I don't want to get too deep in that.
Daryl?
Daryl.
So since they present at the PSAP as a TTY call, does the class of service show anything different?
See, today it's going to be a standard. You probably won't notice a nature change in a TTY, RTT to TTY call today. Now, that's a very good question. We should determine that. I know it. I don't want to talk out of turn with the NENA working groups, but this is a question that we've had: is do we mark the call as it travels across the ESI net when it's been translated from a legacy TTY to RTT? Now, that's an NG911 PSAP question, or ESI net NGCS question. What we do in an interim RTT solution may not, that may not be something available. But from regards to the call flow, the call definitely will probably be marked. So your NGCS and your NG911 PSAP should recognize that it's an interrupt call, if you will, to that regard. Currently, when you're going to get it today in the current interim RTT to TTY, the gateway is done by the wireless carrier, and I don't believe there's any change in the alley component, but we should probably look into that.
We can verify that for sure, but I'm pretty sure it's going to present as a wireless call right this minute.
So kind of to give you your answer, we're trying to cover that in NG911. Now, whether we've got it covered in the interim solution that the FCC is staging now, I'm not sure, and we'll have to take that as an action item.
Any other questions on this? I got one. Oh, Christy.
Are the carriers or anyone else marketing this to the general public? You said we could be getting calls today. How does the public know this exists?
remember, from the regards of what we're doing today as an interim, the public would not, they would only, the outreach should be from the phone perspective. From the getting the call into the PSAP, it would be the same as if they're using a TTY, TDD adapter to get that call in. But I do believe that most of the carriers are going to be reaching out. I think it's yeah, as it's more available. Remember, this is a staged deployment, so there's some of it's, I think, experience. So as they get experience, the public education, I think, will grow.
Just to add a little bit to that is, so if someone, because I've got it on a Verizon phone and my AT&T phone. I've got both, and so on the AT&T it's an app. On the Verizon right now on my iPhone, it's in the settings. I can turn it on in the settings instead of using an app. And so we've been playing with it, and we've discovered it's not quite as user friendly as we'd like to see it. So that's one issue that we'll be looking at. Yeah, there's no voice component. And then also, I just want to reiterate that right now, if I were to dial 911 through my RTT capable phone, it arrives at the 911 center and it will be converted to a TTY. So here we've got an issue with somebody, a citizen who's using RTT thinking that they're using real time, and the PSAP, the 911 center, is getting it in TTY. And if you know how to communicate with TTYs, there's that component of waiting, using abbreviations. There's going to be some confusion, I think, between the user and the 911 call takers. So this is all something that we are aware of and that we will be trying to educate more on over this next year at various state conferences. And hopefully, we will get where we need to be so that all citizens have the equal, equitable access to 911 as just picking up a phone and calling 911.
The FCC folks are working on a PSAP education functionality right now. We actually discussed that with their office that is handling that this morning. So hopefully you'll see some stuff coming out as well. Yes, ma'am?
Do you have a PSAP that currently has this service that
No. One thing that is important for us to point out is I mentioned a little bit ago, you must have a solution to receive real-time text directly. And one of the key factors here is that we're going to have to send a request letter, just like you do for text to 911. If a PSAP wants to receive text to 911 or real-time text directly, they're going to have to request that, and you'll have the 6-month window the carriers will have the 6-month window to comply. Go ahead. Yes, it will. And I'm going to tell you that after this event, we are going to actually, am taking an action item. We're going to be creating an issue statement form through Nina. I will be volunteering Tony to head that working group up. So, but I'll help her. So we'll definitely put some education together as well.
All right, so my name is Sunil Nagarkar. I am the tech lead for Google's Android Emergency Location Service. Oh, no, it's not. Just keep the key. Oh, perfect. All right. Got it working now. Okay, so what is Android's Emergency Location Service? Well, I recall an earlier presenter mentioning that you have NG911, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have better location. Well, better location is kind of what we're all about here. The idea behind the emergency location service is we want to take the same location that's available on all Google phones. This is the same location you get in Google Maps and Uber and apps like that. And we want to get that straight into PSAPs and into the hands of call takers. So there are a couple of points I want to hit about that. One, we're offering this as a supplemental service. This is not intended to replace control plane. We're offering this in addition to control plane. We want to kind of supplement the information that's already there. Second, This just works. There is no app that's necessary to install. This is present on 99% of all Android devices. The user does not have to configure this in any way. They don't have to touch anything. They don't have to buy a new phone or upgrade their hardware or anything like that. We've also designed this to be extremely easy to integrate for our partners. We use some very simple methods of transmitting the location. Anybody should be able to kind of set up an endpoint to receive this in a very short amount of time. I'll cover that in a second. And finally, and hopefully one of the most important points, is free for all partners. We are not charging for this at all. There is no profit motive here. The only thing we want is to help keep our Android users safer. On the right side here, you can see some of our current stats. We're already deployed and live in 14 countries around the world. We're currently working to bring this to the United States as well, which is why we're here. So I'm sure you guys are all kind of familiar with this. I've organized kind of the FCC roadmap for emergency location to a little table to make it easier to visualize. You can see the plan from 2015 through to 2022. Currently, Google believes we're at the 2019 location standards here. In fact, I would go so far as to say that if you're taking into account just kind of horizontal XY location, we're probably at the 2020 standards. Z-axis, altitude, that's something we're investing a lot of time and research in right now. Earlier this year, we launched a new indoor altitude API, and we're currently doing a lot of research on how to turn this into floor level, which is, of course, what's going to be useful to first responders and people actually taking the calls in the PSAP. The upshot here is that within 1 year, we believe we're going to be at the 2022 location standards, okay? So 80% within 50 meters, 100% have handsets Z capable. So let me give a quick overview, 4 simple steps kind of at a high level of how ELS actually works. So as I mentioned, this is present on all Android phones already today. When the user dials 911 or makes an emergency call, we detect that, we activate. We use the Android Fuse location provider, the location provider that's present on all Android phones, to start deriving location, figuring out location on the handset. Once the handset has derived its location, we are going to send that through to a partner endpoint. Partners are, we can work with carriers, we can work with third parties in the emergency services, anybody who can kind of build an endpoint to receive our location information and can get that through into the PSAP. And several of our partners are in the room today as well. Once the location gets to the endpoint, it is then the partner's responsibility to make sure that it gets through to the PSAP in front of call takers. I want to quickly go over some test results. This was a deep indoor test conducted by a Tier 1 U.S. carrier we're hoping to launch with soon. They compared traditional AGPS and cell, so phase 1 and phase 2 location versus ELS location. I want you to note that the AGPS and cell yields add up to 100% there, so it's kind of comparing either AGPS or cell to the ELS location. You can see we had a yield of 90%, and if you look at the 67th and 90th percentile errors in both these cases, you notice that we are substantially better at 17 and 18 meters respectively as compared to even AGPS, which is 43 and 107 meters respectively. Let me briefly cover how this is kind of all configured and controlled. I mentioned this is present on all Android devices. That doesn't necessarily mean this is active on all Android devices. We work with our partners to kind of answer 3 basic questions. When should ELS be activated? How is the location gathered? And where should we send the location? On the right side, you can see kind of a brief sample, simplified configuration. This happens to represent our configuration for the UK. If the user dials 911 or 112, if the phone is in the UK, we gather location, send it to that endpoint, so on and so forth. And finally, I want to leave you with some success stories that we've had. I mentioned that we are already live in 14 countries. These are anecdotes direct from police and first responders in 2 countries. First in New Zealand, a group that was kind of backpacking in the Bay of Plenty that became lost. They were able to make a 111 call, the emergency number in New Zealand, and we were able to deliver a 6-meter GPS location. Search and Rescue was able to use that to come in, find them immediately, walk them out. In Estonia, some kids were at home, their toaster caught on fire, they called 112 as they'd been trained to do. Unfortunately, while they knew their flat and street number, they did not know their complete address, they didn't know any of their relatives' information. Luckily, we were able to deliver a Wi-Fi location and get the ambulance and first responders there to take care of that situation. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Steve.
Great. Thanks, Sunil. My name is Steve Malukas. I'm one of the leads in Android location. And what I'd like to do is show a couple of demos and just highlight what Sunil was just going through. So the first one is going to be a video. Let's see if I could. Give me 1 second. All right. So Sunil talked about how in ELS it's highly configurable. We could output the position in any way the destination endpoint would like to receive it. We created this visualization tool. That's all that we're showing here is just visualize how the ELS location can make it to the destination endpoint, can make it to the PSAP. So if a carrier came to us and said, hey, we want to position every second from ELS, this is what they would see. And this is just driving around in our Mountain View office. The other demo kind of visualization that I want to show you is we have this, we call it our Thunderbird app. Thunderbird is our internal name for ELS, External Emergency Location Services in Android. And basically what this is going to showcase is if I, let's see, I'm going to offset this to a different area. I have a phone here that's whitelisted through one of the carriers. So I have the ability to dial 911 on this phone, and it'll route to the carrier's network, but it won't actually go to the carrier. So if I dial 911 on here and hit send, it's connecting. A lot of you won't be able to see this here, but the position will update on the map. In Android, we also show the actual we show the actual position on the screen, and we actually output the lat long on the screen as well. So if someone's in distress and their location can't get there, you could see that on the screen and read it to the PSAP. So here we are. The position dialed in. It centered on the screen because it updated it. It refreshed automatically. And these are all the parameters and fields that we send in ELS: the lat, long, the uncertainty of the position or the accuracy. This is deep indoors, and you could see here we gave an uncertainty of 15 meters with a vertical accuracy of 2. And we output, as Sunil mentioned, the altitude. This is the actual altitude to the WGS 84 standard, which is what's outputted in GPS. So negative for this building, negative 19. I think this area is around negative 40 at ground, so it's spot on. And Sunil's going to zoom in, and we could see the actual position, which is exactly the wing that we're in this building. So that's it for the demo. I just want to note this is already available in every Android phone, as Sunil noted. We just need carriers or our partners dealing with in the emergency space to turn it on. Thank you. Sure. Questions? So all GPS components that are shipped in the U.S. have GPS and GLONASS enabled. And so what we do is we fuse the positions together. We have our GPS position, our Wi-Fi position, our sensors to do PDR, and we output that through the fused location provider. And we're not inventing anything new here. Our team does the fused location provider. We're just trying to surface the position that's already available in Android to the emergency responders. One more question? Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Reinhard Eckel with Rapid SOS. It's an honor to be here today. Thanks for dedicating your time to public safety. And it was great to follow directly on Sunil and Steve and the great work that they're doing with Android Emergency Location Service. I think it's a natural order of presentations because we're going to talk about a pilot project that we at Rapid SOS have done with Google and their Android ELS, so that we can really tie it together and look at how Android ELS can be put into the context of NG911, and how can we make sure that the infrastructure that we're building out here in the United States is in a good position to receive that accurate location that has been successfully deployed in other parts of the world. So it's only a 10-minute presentation, so I'll keep it very short. And because I'm going to run out of time, I'll start with the results first. And then I'll explain what the pilot was. So we looked at the results of the pilot in 3 different dimensions. The first one is really about the data, the hard facts about the pilot. Was the location more accurate? Was the location faster? And here the answer is absolutely. We were able to demonstrate in the pilot that the ELS location using our next generation 911 clearinghouse was transmitted faster to the public safety answering point, and that it was more accurate, more precise. The second dimension that we looked at in terms of results was the operational perspective. How does it work for the call takers, the dispatchers, who have a very stressful job and who have to make decisions in split seconds with very limited information at hand? So we really stress tested that in our pilot regions, and the result here was, yes, call takers were able to receive the location as supplemental data through the integrations into our clearinghouse inside their existing software systems that they're using. It wasn't anything new. It was inside their existing call taking, mapping, computer-aided dispatch. And they perceived it as very useful. And the third dimension that we looked at in terms of results is the human component. Does this make a difference? Is this something that really needs to be rolled out? And here, we were able to collect a few examples together with our pilot regions around what are the applications of this? What are the situations in which faster, more accurate location really saves lives? And obviously, it's a short presentation, so we only have very few examples up here, but I'm sure that our pilot PSAPs would be happy to give you more examples in a more informal setting. But yes, it was used in real 911 emergencies, and it made a real difference. And that obviously is a testament to the power of this more accurate and faster location. So now taking a step back, what is the NG911 clearinghouse? What was the pilot that we have done? So as you heard from Sunil and Steve, Android DLS can send location to an endpoint, and that endpoint is loosely defined. It could be a wireless carrier, it could be a technology provider, just like the clearinghouse. And the approach that we've taken here is that we ingest Android Emergency Location Service in the formats that are being available, and then we transform it into the NINA i3 NG911 data formats. So our clearinghouse is a next generation 911 LIS, a location information server that is built to NINA i3, and that integrates with all the different flavors and manufacturers of call taking, mapping, and dispatching software. So our approach is not to put a new piece of software or hardware in the PSAP. Our approach is to connect with the pieces that are already in place and use a standardized format so that there's nothing proprietary. And what that allows us to do is, it's a very scalable process, and we're able to offer this for free to public safety. We don't charge a service fee or integration fee to either our partners or the public safety answering points. And what we do is we deliver that location as supplemental data. It is not replacing the carrier E911 location that is regulated, and we appreciate that the wireless carriers are doing a lot of great work to improve location, but they are restricted by regulations and by standards and by certain protocols that might not be consistent to with ELS, at least for the time being. So because we use this supplemental approach using NG mechanisms, we're able to get this out faster and really start saving lives with that. And yeah, we integrate with all major manufacturers, and we'll show a few examples later. Now, a little bit more about the logistics of the pilot. We had a pilot project in January of this month. It ran for about of this year. It ran for about 5 weeks, and we selected 3 different regions in the country to be representative of the different flavors of 911. So we had a large system, North Central Texas Council of Governments, with 44 PSAPs in a hosted environment, in kind of an urban, suburban, somewhat rural setting. It was a mix. And I'm just looking into the audience here. I want to give a shout out to the director, Christy Williams, who's been a real champion for location accuracy. We piloted with Collier County Sheriff's Office in Florida, which is a hosted system with 2 PSAPs, very modern, kind of consolidated PSAP, very excellent work they're doing down there in the wake of Hurricane Irma, and really appreciate the work down there. And we also integrated this solution and rolled it out for this pilot in Loudoun County, Tennessee, which is a smaller county PSAP in rural Tennessee. So we really wanted to show the different morphologies and make sure that we capture test data that is representative of the country. So quick recap of the results. When it comes to the hard data, we found that the ELS location transmitted through the NG911 clearinghouse was faster and more accurate. And I'll try to quantify that for you a little bit. When it comes to faster, and I realize that chart is a little bit small, but what you'll see here is that for 70% of calls, the ELS location was available to the call taker when the call taker picked up the phone and said, 911, what's the location of your emergency? If you compare that to the data that they're receiving today from the E911 mechanisms, there is a percentage of calls that comes in with initial phase 2, but in the PSAPs that we have done the pilot project with, it was around 22%. So for a large number of calls, we were able to shave off 25, 30 seconds. And the feedback that we've gotten from PSAPs is that's a meaningful difference. That could make a difference of life and death in certain situations. The other important aspect of the results of the pilot is the location accuracy. Not just faster, but also more accurate. So what we've seen is that on average, the ELS location transmitted through the clearinghouse had a radius of about 37 meters, which is about 120 feet. And we were able to deliver 76% of calls within 50 meters of reported uncertainty. So when Sunil was mentioning that Google is able to meet the 2019 standards, I want to say they're already halfway to the next one, right? So that was very encouraging to see that the location on the smartphone is actually already meeting where we need to be in terms of the regulations. The control group, the phase 2 location, had obviously very accurate location in outdoor environments when the GPS system was working as designed, but there were a lot of calls coming from indoors, so the average over all calls that had phase 2 was 159 meters, which is obviously not dispatchable. So got some very good feedback from PSAPs on this. Now going into the operational aspect of the pilot, kind of moving away from the hard data and the hard facts to what did call takers say about that? Was it perceived as useful? Was it perceived as something that makes a difference in their day-to-day? And here we want to show you a little bit of a preview of what it looked like in the public safety answering point. These screenshots are a little bit small, so I want to invite you to come over to our table afterwards and we can give you a little bit more of a in-depth view. But what you'll see here is that we've integrated our clearinghouse with 16 of the largest vendors of 911 call taking, mapping, and computer-aided dispatch. We're entirely vendor neutral. We are willing to work with anybody who wants to integrate it with us, and the majority of companies have done this. I have 3 small screenshots up here of partners that we're providing the software in the pilot regions. So what you'll see up here is you'll see Airbus with their VestorMap local product, where the Rapid SOS location, in this case from the ELS, was displayed side by side with the alley location. You'll see the same for the GeoComp GeoLinks map, where you have 2 icons on the same map. One coming from the alley with a big circle of uncertainty, and one coming from ELS through the clearinghouse with a smaller circle. And then you'll also have Rave Smart 911, also an integration partner of ours that also plots both locations side by side so that the call taker can see and discern, what is the best location that I have available at the time. And here I really want to stress it's supplemental. We do not remove the E911 alley location from the screen, and there is a place for that, right? It's regulated, it's trusted, and we do not want to interfere with that in any way or form. Also, I just want to mention there's other partners here that have integrated with Rapid SOS, so please come see us, and also want to mention that Rapid Deploy, Motorola, and InDigital are all partners of Rapid SOS, so please seek them out and learn how they integrate it with us. We did a survey with call takers and dispatchers after the pilot project to really learn what their sentiment was towards this new location. And we found that 82% have noticed that these new locations are coming in, and they found it very useful. 88% of call takers said, yes, that's very useful. And we got all sorts of colorful examples of particular calls where it made a difference, and situations in which that faster, more accurate location made it possible for them to respond faster or more effectively. Now to the more human, emotional aspect. 1 minute, 2 minutes? All right. I knew I was going to run out of time, so. Yeah. Thanks for keeping me honest, Patrick. All right, so for real use case examples, please come talk to us. I'll just show one here that was very interesting. Call taker was panicking, was giving a wrong location. Responders were dispatched, and when they arrived, there was nothing there. So with the ELS location, they were able to find the caller. But there's plenty of examples that I want you to exchange some notes with the participating PSAPs and with us. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. It was a great experience, wonderful working together with the participating PSAPs, wonderful working together with the Android ELS team, doing great work that would really save a lot of lives. And we're excited to see the results of the pilot and where we take it next from here. Please come see us at the back for a full report. We'll be able to talk more without time constraints. And sorry, Patrick, I always run long. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Roy Massey with Motorola Solutions. And first of all, I want to thank each of you for being here and also thank the NG911 Institute for hosting the event. We want to share a few thoughts on Motorola's experience and plans for precise location. We're working with our partner RapidSOS, who you just heard from, and we believe that precise caller location is a very important point in the history of public safety, and I want to demonstrate that through a story today. But before we jump into that, I would just want to say, Motorola has deep roots in public safety going all the way back to 1930 when we put the car radios in the police departments around Illinois. So we've been doing this for quite a while, and of course since then we've done a lot of things in wireless communication breakthroughs, and most all of that has gone to the public safety customers. Today we are involved with enterprise software, so all the way from receiving the calls all the way out to the first responders with the radios and the software in between those things that connects it today. We serve over 100,000 public safety and commercial customers worldwide in 100 countries. So I want to move ahead here and keep things rolling. Our story is going to start about a boy lost in the woods. My son is an Eagle Scout, and we're very proud of that, so yes, I've got to get my little brag in there. I am not an Eagle Scout, and I can assure you it's easy to get lost out in the woods when I've been out there with him, but I can laugh about it now. So what I wanted to talk about was a story along those lines about a boy who's lost in the woods, and we're going to keep the drama going. There's going to be a strong storm approaching. Now, this sort of thing happens frequently in a lot of customers' areas. It doesn't have to be the woods. It could be somewhere else that people can get lost, but we'll use this example to demonstrate some of the precise location benefits. I should say before we jump in that Motorola does have precise location deployed at about a half a dozen PSAPs or 911 centers in the country now in production, and some others are in pilot modes. So we have that going now in the 911 centers already and are seeing very good results like Rapid just outlined. So this boy is lost in the woods, and as you may have noticed from time to time, your cell coverage, sometimes when you can't place a voice call, you can send a text. And we're talking about NG911 broadly here as well. So this boy has been the beneficiary of a public service announcement from his local 911 center that when you can't call, text, like we saw a little while ago. So he remembers that, and fortunately for him, even though he can't place a voice call, he can send a text. Well, that's good enough because the precise location services can work either with voice calls or with text to 911 messages. So he texts, and the call recipient at the 911 center, the text recipient, is able to text back with him on that channel and determines that he's not injured, he is just really lost out there. So one of the things that we want to talk about is it's going to be kind of a before and after comparison through these slides of Enhanced 911 or E911 as it's called, and what we have in mind for next generation 911, especially with precise location benefits. E911 has served the community well, but it's based on 1980s and 90s technology. And of course, as we all know, things have come a long way in just that time. There's a lot of things possible today that weren't possible then, and so NG911 wants to make the most of that and put it into public safety. Some of the things that you'd first encounter with E911 in this situation, if the boy could call and voice call in that case, you would have a very poor location accuracy. We've just been hearing from some of the other vendors. One of the things that happens also is people like to spoof their 911 center, unfortunately, and sometimes call in prank calls as if it's a real emergency and say they're somewhere they're really not. With precise location, again, that can be spotted very quickly. The difference would be that you, of course, could see approximately where in the woods he is, and your uncertainty would be measured in meters probably instead of in potentially miles. So we're looking here at a screenshot similar to what Reinhardt just showed for some of the other products using Rapid SOS. This is two circles here. One is the broader gold circle represents the uncertainty from the enhanced 911 system with its wireless services based on the tower location. And then the smaller red circle is based on the precise location that Motorola is receiving from Rapid SOS. The green dot in the middle indicates the center point of the telco location, and then of course the red circle has its own center based on where it believes the caller is. The red line just connects the two in case you have multiple calls coming in like this. As was mentioned previously, we treat the precise location as supplemental today. We don't try to replace the official regulated location from the telco, but we do supplement it. The broadening out a little bit here, we'll take a broader look at precise location for 911, stepping away from our story for just a second. I won't read all these points off, but we covered some of them just a second ago. But it is very important, and the overall goal at this point in a 911 call is to get a dispatchable location. You know, they often don't ask what is your emergency, but where is your emergency. They're trying to get that, and we work closely with call takers, dispatcher, and hear the recordings as well. And it is surprising how much time has to be spent just trying to get a fix on the location. Many times a caller doesn't know where they are or can't tell you precisely where they are for some reason. So that's important. And then another variable in this is that the person could be moving. That throws another twist into it if the caller is moving or is on the move in some cases. So all of that complicates things, and precise location assists in all those ways. So we're going to jump back to the storyline here for a second. Now that we have the public safety 911 call taker knows where the boy is, that's fine, but that's just the beginning. What needs to happen now is a plan needs to be pulled together, and this is where precise location really starts to pay off in multiple times over. They will then send that call, if you will, or that emergency to someone in the field, first responder, who in this type of situation often is being used for field coordination. The person to first take the call would not necessarily run right out into the woods, but might have to think about what's the plan to get this boy out of the woods, depending on where he is and how precise the location is. In the old world, you know, an uncertainty factor on his location might mean a larger plan. And pulling that together or thinking about all that, and of course then if you have something complicating things like the storm coming in, you have to factor that in as a variable. But if we do know his location, we can jump straight from a larger strategy maybe to tactics. Let's try something quick and easy if we know where he is or think we know where he is. So in this case, the officer will, let's say, assign an officer that he can see is closer, and he sends that female officer, maybe if she's closer to where the boy is in the woods, he sees that on his dispatch screen, and we'll take a look at that. This is showing an officer in the car with a mobile dispatch terminal. And so since the location came in more accurately to begin with, the next downstream stage, the dispatch stage, is seen out on the mobile devices. He can see where the boy is, and he also can see with Motorola's radios the GPS locations of the other officers in the vicinity and see which one is closest. This really starts to save time because simply create the plan and send the officer that is nearest to the boy. So we're moving along here down through our flow, but now things are going to take a twist. The storm is indeed coming in. The boy moves position. Now the plan has already been launched, and yet the boy is moving around. Well, in the old world, or the enhanced 911 world, we'd still get a rather inaccurate location. It might help show that he's moving, but it's still going to be probably too inaccurate to really help. We could define a search grid, and very often what they'll do in these situations is end up recruiting volunteers who've been trained to do a wide area search. They may be able to do it in a storm. They may not. Those are all the sort of factors that go into it under the E911 scenario. But now precise location is going to make a big difference again, because the Astro radios from Motorola, for example, can take and also use the precise location services just like the 911 center did. And the radio itself has the ability to ask not only, you know, where's the boy currently, or where's that caller currently, but the service will also help the radio create a bearing. So you can see there in the bottom corner that 4634 meters north. That's, again, from the Rapid SOS. We did a pilot with them in New York City, is where this actual screenshot is from. And our radios are able to create a bearing. So now, as that search and rescue responder, I go in and I start asking, sending a repeat or a ping back to the precise location service, and my radio is walking me in, essentially move north some number of meters, and you're getting closer and closer and closer where the boy is. So these are all things that can be combined to help get the victim out of that situation, even in bad conditions. So we wrap up. Of course, the boy is returned safely home. We were able to find him straight away, and in the current world of technology, we can even take a photo of him and attach it to the incident record. And you can see there's a litany of things. I won't read them all off, but if you'd like, please come by the booth, and we'll talk about all these differences in E91 and NG911. But the point here really is that having our hands on this main variable of the entire incident, that is, where is the victim? Where are they? And if that's changing in particular, where are they? That has become kind of a lever point, if you will, to transform the whole process. So one of the things that happens when we look at funding for Next Generation 911 is helping to not only buy the technology and get it in place, but also train all of the emergency responders, starting with the 911 center all the way out to the police and fire, whose process will be greatly improved, but they need to know how to use this technology and create operational plans around its use. So all of that goes into helping transform the process overall. So quick summary here. It's precise location of the victim for Next Generation 911, if you consider precise location part of that, broad umbrella of Next Generation 911. And it's based on their smartphone location. The smartphone has a lot of smarts in it, as we've been hearing about, to help that. It also improves emergency response at every step of the process, because so much of it is based on where the victim is located. And then finally, the funding does help us transform the processes for the 21st century. You know, the Uber and the pizza places all have the benefit of taking advantage of precise location, and we want to make sure that that flows out for transformation of the whole process. So I appreciate your time, and hope you'll come by and see us at the booth, and we can talk about it a bit more. I don't know if I've got a little time left for Q&A or not. None at all, okay. One? He says one. Going once, going twice. All right, please come by the booth and see me.
Thank you, everybody. Wait for a presentation to come up, or do I need to advance it? Okay. So I'm going to also talk about a pilot that we did with Google and ELS, one of the other providers, on doing the services. And a little bit about it. So we wanted to look at what we were doing on how this fits in, really is going along with the carrier's location information. So our view of this is not so much putting it as a supplemental or a separate location on the screen to allow the call taker, telecommunicator, to pick which one to use. We're looking at it as combining it in with the carrier's location, on working with a wireless carrier, and including this as the main alley and the main location in either an alley feed for traditional PSAPs that we have today, or it could also be in for next-gen PSAP, working in either way. The solution that we had on what we were looking at doing is it must integrate into the existing PSAPs. There can't be changes to the PSAPs as we work on that on legacy. We saw how long that took when we did wireless phase 1 and phase 2 on trying that to deploy in the country as we're doing it. So we really wanted to look at solutions that would integrate onto the existing PSAPs and not require new training issues or new technology to go in. But fully, we wanted to make sure it fully supports next generation networks too. And next generation network is great because with ELS and technologies like this, which I really consider like a device-initiated location for 911, the technologies are much faster on how they're pushing this location through. So having a next-gen network where either it can be a subscribe type notify method where the locations are pushed down to it, or they can query more often, we're able to get the locations in much faster. So it It works much better with the next generation networks. And the really thing is at the end, we wanted this location to be a single location passed down to the PSAP over the existing location. So if it's a better location than what the carrier is doing, and we can validate that it is a better location and that there's not a problem with it where it may be off, we're using information that we have from the carrier's network to make sure it's a valid call, that there's issues that it may not have been spoofed or other things, validate that it becomes a subset of what the carriers are already doing, and then compare between those and pass the single location down to the PSAP. We did in 2 pilot locations. We did in Snohomish County, Washington, which has a population of about 704,000 people, and we also did it in Palm Beach County, Florida, population of about 1.4 million people. In this mode, we did it with live 911 calls, but we did not want to interject it for a confusing point to the telecommunicators at that time. What we did is we took all the data that we have of when the calls came into the PSAP, what location was done, when the wireless location was available by the wireless carriers, whether or not that location was bid, looking at all the information and saying what would it have done if it was delivered to the PSAP? When would it come up? What location would have been used? And which would have been a more accurate location at that time? We also did it, we normalized it. If we look at normally the ELS data comes with a confidence of 68%. In 911, we use confidence of 90%. So there's a difference of what uncertainties and what numbers matter. So we normalized all this so it came up in the same numbers that we're working at the PSAPs are used to seeing of a confidence of 90% of all the numbers. So as I look at it, and this was sort of mentioned earlier on some of the other presentations, it's really where's the value of a location when it comes in. And I often say really a real value if we don't get the location when the call is answered at the PSAP, because the first thing they ask is what's the location of your emergency? Majority of that value of that location is lost if it's not delivered with the call. So we really look at how will it be? And on average, we're seeing about 10 seconds from the time the call is presented to our server by the wireless carriers, saying a 911 call is being placed, till the bid comes in from a PSAP is on typical 9 to 10 seconds, but depending on the technology. As we move to next gen, that time's can get smaller and smaller. So getting a quicker, so we'll actually see less and less of traditional locations as we see today being presented with the initial call as we move to next gen. One of the pros and the cons, it's quicker, but we're not going to see the location as quick. And then later on, we need more accurate location, but it's much further into the call itself. So what we did is the solution. One of the things was talked about was a challenge, I think, that even the Google team kind of talked about with ELS is how's it integrate into the wireless carriers network. We look at this as we implemented into the wireless carriers network in a fully standards compliant approach. We made the server, this ELS server that the data is being sent from the phone to the server, fit into the network very much like the existing location servers are to a wireless carrier. So today they're querying a PDE or an ESMLC, their location server, and it's coming out of a node called the Mobile Positioning Center or a GMLC, the gray box that's there, the blue box is connecting to. And what we're having it do is basically it's querying in another box on the same protocol. So it's saying I'm getting 2 locations. It's already set up to be able to handle this. So it fits into the wireless carrier's network as really a fully standards type compliant solution for the wireless carrier. So it's very easy to implement. And what it does is, so our server right there really is the WDLS. It's the extra server that connects there that's receiving these messages from Google ELS. And we look at other location sources too. And we're looking at multiple location sources that maybe come in where ELS it becomes one of the many components that we'll be utilizing to sort of augment the locations for the wireless carrier. So talked about the accuracy. Those are the results of the pilot. You're going to see similar results for all the ELS type data because it's the same ELS data. So what I'm going to look at first of all is sort of where the uncertainty is. And so that was one of the things to remember is these numbers of uncertainties may look a little different than some of the others because we've normalized these to the 90% confidence. So the GPS uncertainties look really good. The Wi-Fi uncertainties also look really good on what I'd call a phase 2 capable location. Remember, uncertainty measures sort of the quality of the location, what we think it is. It doesn't actually relate one-to-one to accuracy. The accuracy, we need to go out there and do ground truth. It says, we believe with a 90% probability that we think that the call is somewhere within that area of uncertainty. Not that it's right in the center, not that it's right at the edge, but it's somewhere in there. It doesn't say how accurate it really is on what the carriers will measure. An important thing to always remember on that. So one of the things we really looked at is what are the locations we're getting today from the carriers, the phase 2 locations, what are we getting on the first bid, and what are we getting when the PDE really was only providing a cell ID location. So what we see for the carriers today, some other numbers, on the initial bid, when the call was answered at the PSAP, we were seeing in our trials about 20% of the times the call was coming in with a phase 2 location. And the other 80% it was not. When we added ELS to the mix to it, we were seeing that ELS was giving us about 58% of the time we were getting a phase 2 capable location in that exact same time window of when the bid came in, when the PSAP answered the call. And we were using that, we were actually comparing the actual timers when they came in to see if it was available. If we look at the phase 2 location information and where it is, what we really found is when the carrier was only providing a cell ID location, ELS was also providing a location that would give us a pretty good location too. We found that 46% of the time when the carrier only had a cell ID location on the initial bid, we were getting a location from ELS. So that was saying in those times when you were only receiving phase 1 location at the PSAP, we would be getting a phase 2 and then 46% of the times. The only reason we weren't getting higher is just an issue of timing, how quickly the location comes in and when the bid is coming in. If we look at later on in PSAP bids, and this is it kind of becomes interesting where it is, one of the things to remember is on a wireless carrier system, if we look at 30 seconds, we get a pretty good yield of phase 2 locations. It doesn't mean the PSAP has bid that, because the location information is really most useful at the first bid, but oftentimes we have the location that's come back from the carrier and it's sitting on the GMLC but hasn't been bid. And what we find in general across the carriers, if we do it between the different carriers, about 83% of the time, and we saw this in the trials, we were getting a phase 2 location eventually at the wireless carrier. It just took longer to be done. We were seeing with the ELS, the yield, if we add in the GPS and the Wi-Fi, it raised it up significantly. We're getting a 90% yield of location, of getting a phase 2 capable location at sort of a later time point. We took this very conservative. We said we only wanted to look at the first location that came back from either the carrier or ELS on this. So if we look at also, we want to say, what is the potential of making this more accurate as you look at the call later on down the line? How does ELS improve overall accuracy with the carrier that you may get at this later part? So we look at this point of uncertainty, reported uncertainty, because you might use uncertainty to pick which one is the better location of where it is. And what we found is that about 15% of the time, the ELS was slightly better location than what the carrier had. Other percent of the time, the carrier's location was good enough of where it was. But then we also found that 19% of the time, the location was significantly better, where the carrier's uncertainty may have been reported at, maybe it would be 200 meters, but the ELS uncertainty would be reported at 10 meters of uncertainty or so on. So we found altogether about 34% of the time, we were getting at the final location, we were getting a more accurate location with this because the mix of what we were getting with Wi-Fi and also some of the GPS locations are a little bit more accurate also. So really, when we look at this, as sort of the conclusion we found, the ELS really was significant on adding more accuracy, making the location information more accurate as it was delivered to the PSAP. And it was done, it provided in a very simple way. It was ELS for us was very easy to connect up to and pass it. There's still some work to be done with it. There's ways we'd like to get the percentage of the calls that we get, the Android devices that pass ELS to be improved. We think it can improve the information, even the location even further. We think we can improve the speed of it a little further. It's a fantastic starting point we have that really improves it for the carrier. We think the best way of delivering this is through the carrier's location network, where it becomes a piece of their location infrastructure that they choose and validate the location information and pass that on to the on down to the PSAPs. Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes.
So, as a 911 center, when might one see this in production where it's actually being delivered into a PSAP? Given that it seems to be working, what are the roadblocks to turning it on into 911 centers?
Biggest roadblocks right now are going through the evaluation and testing with the wireless carriers.
we test this very thoroughly. We want to make sure that it doesn't cause any problems or cause any impacts. So we're going out there testing it. We're going through proof of concepts or pilots or trials with major carriers right now. The WDLS, our base platform that we use, that's a node that's in production, that we have in production right now. The plugins and how we do it, the major time on taking it is just evaluating it into the carrier's network and then turning it on. The nice part is once we turned it on with the carriers, it's not anything that have to be done at the PSAP side.
Will we see it in 2018 or 2022? When will we see it?
I hope so. Yeah. So, I mean, my intentions are, I mean, our WDLS platform is going live in 2018, so it's going to be there available. I'm not going to say I'm going to predict what the carriers do on where it is.
Make it available, but
yeah, we're making it available. We're in trials and proof of concept with major carriers out there. My crystal ball says it's going to happen sooner than later, but I can't make. Whenever I make a prediction, I can only guarantee I'll be wrong. Sure.
Hi, I'm Fred White. I'm with Laser, and surprise, surprise, I'm going to talk about location.
I hear it's the most important thing.
That's it. Well, in fact, let's see. It's kind of a big deal. So I actually had a few setup slides here before getting to the meat of the presentation about wireless location and device-based determinations. I'm going to kind of skip through those and go right into a specific topic. I will point out it's kind of interesting. Right in this very room at this event 2 years ago, people were asking, is device-based location something that it can even work for public safety? How would we do that? What does that look like? And all sorts of questions were floating around about it when companies like RapidSOS or us stood up and said, hey, this is something we want to do. There were a lot of questions about, well, I'm not quite so sure about that. And now here we are, and it's a given, right? This is going to be a part of the mix. It's going to happen. It's happening now. So it's a pretty interesting thing to watch that happen in a couple of years. So I'm just going to blow through this because we already know all that. Yes, you've seen interesting things like this. So let's talk about a very specific topic. Let's talk about routing. So for some of you in the room, this will be a problem you're very familiar with. For others, I'll give a quick overview. So in today's world, the vast majority of mobile call routing is done based off the cell sector that fields the mobile call, right? And there's a process that jurisdictions go through where they actually kind of haggle over those cell sectors because cell sectors do not align neatly to borders of jurisdictions. And so cell sectors overlap, and the abutting jurisdictions have to decide, do we route that one to this PSAP or do we route it to that PSAP? And they'll look at, population density, square footage, square mileage that's covered in their jurisdiction. And they do this on a very regular basis. And they do the best they can, right? They try to make sure that the calls get routed to the jurisdiction that can actually dispatch them help. And that's really the nature of this problem is if the cell sector-based routing sends you to a jurisdiction that cannot dispatch you help, they then have to transfer the call to the appropriate jurisdiction, hopefully. Sometimes they might not know who it is, and they might transfer it, and then that person says, oh, no, that's not it, and they'll transfer it. But whatever the case may be, and you would hope even the data would flow with the call. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So in some cases, the caller is right back at the beginning of the process answering the question again, where are you? How do we get to you? And it's not totally clear right now how many times this happens around the country, what percentage of calls it happens, and it's definitely different jurisdiction to jurisdiction just based off how the sectors align to your boundaries. But whether it's 8% of the time, 20% of the time, there's some debate, it probably falls somewhere in that range across the country as an average. It almost doesn't matter if it's 8 or it's 20 because these are the situations where someone calls and they get transferred. There is an outsized representation of negative outcomes in these calls, right? Because you've added in time when you don't have time to add, right? So routing is a really big deal. We try very hard. We don't call these misroutes, right? It didn't fail. The system worked as designed. Colloquially, maybe you'll say misroutes, but The idea here is the call got routed to a jurisdiction that could not dispatch help. That's the end. So then the question is, well, that's great, but could we do something else, right? Could we do something other than cell sector routing? And so the idea there would be route the call based off the actual location of the caller. And then the question becomes, yeah, but can you do that? Is that even feasible? So as we talk about things like location-based data flowing into the system, then it really becomes all about speed, right? How fast can you get it to impact that routing? Because as the call progresses through the carrier's network, it can be sub-second sometimes, not often, sub-second that routing decision is made. It's typically more like around 2 seconds from the time, and that measurement of time there is from the time the user presses the send button on their phone until the carrier network is making a decision about where do I need to send this call. So what we've done is we've done a lot of trials and tests, both with carrier partners and with jurisdictional partners on a broad range of location-based stuff. But today we're going to talk just about routing. And I'm going to use 3 common use cases where routing can be an issue. And I'm also going to do a combination of sometimes where we tested with a carrier partner and then sometimes where we tested across carriers with a given jurisdiction. So this is, and easy to visualize, right? 2 very nice square jurisdictions that abut each other. But even in that case, if you see where the star is in the bottom, where the cell tower is, you imagine that cell sector is a pie wedge coming off of that cell tower. And most of that pie wedge is going to go to the jurisdiction on the right, right? Most of the field of coverage is in the right. Some goes a little bit into the left. And so when those 2 jurisdictions decide, how do we do this? Well, the one that's got the most population is the one that's going to take it. And in this case, it's the jurisdiction on the right. So in cooperation with a carrier partner in their production environment, this was also done in partnership with our pals, West over there, we actually went and we did some of the same measurements John was just talking about in looking at some of that ELS data. And so we made live calls on phones that had been enabled with our technology in the native dialing mechanism so that as the user dialed 911 and they placed that call, our platform was receiving information from the device. It could have been a fully determined location, so something like Google's ELS, where the operating system is telling us, hey, here's where we think the device is. It could have been individual pieces of sensor data, Wi-Fi signals, GPS, Bluetooth, anything that we could get from the device as soon as it was available, right? Which in some cases may be before the fully determined location of the device. And we use that to determine a location and an uncertainty with an appropriate public safety confidence that we can then hand to the routing decision function and say, if we've got it in time, and if it's a credible enough, accurate enough location, you might want to route on this instead of routing based off that cell sector. So this test location was identified by our carrier partner. They picked it, they ran the tests, and they placed a whole lot of different calls there in various modes. All right, turn the phone off, let it sit for 5 minutes, turn it back on and place the call as fast as you can. Do another one after the phone's been on for a while. Do one where location services have been turned off. So lots of different permutations of that test. And what you'll see there is we've drawn a 50-meter radius just for reference. Our goal was not necessarily to have 50 meters of accuracy for the routing. It could be different depending on the size of the cell sector. You can actually define that based off a lot of different parameters. But in that case, it's just for reference. And what you'll see is the locations that are plotted up there are a combination of kind of the initial location determined by the carrier network, and some are a phase 2 location. But from a routing perspective, it happened exactly like you'd expect. This isn't a surprise because of where that cell tower is. All the carrier's decisions were to route this to the jurisdiction on the right. So in that case, that would have been a call that needed a transfer to get to the PSAP that could actually dispatch help to the location we made the call. 100% of our calls determined the location was in the other PSAP and did so within the time constraints that the carrier placed on it to do the routing based off that location. So that's one example, right? Kind of side by side, nice straight line. Those happen all over the country. Then you have things like this. It's probably a little hard to see. Maybe it's not so bad if you're not at the side. So what you can see there is this is a case where one jurisdiction has like a little outcropping that's poking into another jurisdiction. So much nastier than a nice straight line. And in this case, it becomes almost impossible to define a cell sector-based routing that could ever handle that, right? Because it's a little outcropping, and you're not going to have cell sectors with that kind of precision. So this is just another example. And in this one, as opposed to working with a specific carrier on this test, this was a test that was conducted by a jurisdiction themselves, and the calls were 5 identically configured phones, 1 on each of the 4 national carriers, and 1 that had been configured with our capability. Placed 5 calls there, and the results are what you see, right? The carrier locations were, as expected, based off cell tower and based off cell sector. And so all of them routed to the location not pink. Our location was identified, determined within the appropriate amount of time to have impacted location or routing, and would have routed to the jurisdiction in pink. Last one I'll do because it's just a different kind of use case. This one was also done in partnership with a carrier. This is not a jurisdictional based one, this was a carrier one. So this is a case where you've got a larger jurisdiction and there are other jurisdictions within that jurisdiction's footprint. So they are completely contained within the other jurisdiction. So there's kind of your third use case. So in this case, calls placed within any of the darker pink boxes or shapes you ideally would go to the jurisdiction of that shape, right? Because they're the ones who could dispatch the help. But because of the layout, the nature, how they sit within a larger jurisdiction, they often go to that larger outline jurisdiction. So we ran a series of tests, and the outcomes were identical to the ones we've talked about before. So all of those test locations routed to a place that would have required a transfer to the location or to the jurisdiction that could actually send help. And our system integrated into the carrier system, so they were doing side-by-side comparison, had the location available to do the routing to the appropriate jurisdiction. So that's the results of the test. It's real, it can happen. We're really excited about that. We're excited about everything that's been talked about in terms of location. We're big proponents of lots of different solutions being out there to try to get location to the right people at the right time. This is one thing we are particularly interested in and super excited to say it really can work. So 2 years ago, we were saying, hey, can device-based location even be something that everyone can get excited about and agree to? And here we are 2 years later, and yeah, it seems to be. So now we're saying, hey, location before route. So get the location before you even do your routing decision is also something. So we might be where we were 2 years ago about location generally right now with routing. It's here.
Hi, everybody. Apologies for my accent if it's hard to understand. I'm a stranger in a strange land. Are we good here? We're not good? All right. Okay, there we go. So I am Steve. I'm from the future. And I'm here to talk about the cloud, what's possible, what has been possible for many years and has not been presented to American public safety yet. And I'm hopefully making enough noise to give some of you a chance to experience the cloud, IP-based dispatch platforms, native web. I mean, our installed solution is a Google Chrome browser, and everything else runs in a tab. So I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but I'm running a client site. So this is technically a case study. So I'm hopefully going to skirt the lines of Patrick's wrath over here. And what I'm demonstrating here, just by ability, I'm not going to go into a full-blown product demo, just to understand that we're looking at a live PSAP right now in South Africa. That's 10,000 miles away. The data center I'm using for this is 6,000 miles away in Northern Ireland. I'm connecting to this on Google Chrome and my 3G dongle, and I'm completely live. And I can dispatch these guys like I was right next to them. In fact, I can just talk to you a little bit about location. Everyone's talking about location, but as a computer-aided dispatch platform, we are completely native on the XY. So we've been native on the XY since we built the platform, because as first responders ourselves, We believe it's very important to know not only where people are, but where your responders are too. And if you know where your people are and your responders are, you can make some very clever calculations, and you can go and you can find your people, and you can push your responders to the right place and give them the correct situational awareness, which is everything. So when trying to develop a solution for public safety, we try and develop a solution that is not just call taking and dispatch. It is actually operational intelligence. It's helping us be better at what we do. So the internet, again, the cloud gives us all kinds of tools to do this, whether it's location services, whether it's traffic integrations or weather, or any number of the plus 50 integrations we've got in our platform. The ultimate beneficiary is the end user when it comes to presenting the data. So what we're looking at over there is just a heat map, and that is, this is a small PSAP, 2 seats, 5 vehicles, and they also, by the way, let me just show you to give an idea of the benefit of next-gen dispatch. So here we go. So that's the entire vessels of South Africa plotted in real time. So, and I can change that map layer for you if you like. Let's put up something more friendly. Do something for the Google guys. Okay. So the map is positioned across. These are the location. Let me just zoom in here. My zoom's a bit out. Okay. So that's call distribution. And now I can also show you this. So if you have the location of your vehicles and you have traffic services like Waze, like TomTom, you can do these kind of calculations. Now this is completely live again of the responder's location. You can see those pulsing icons on the map. That's just running our cell phone app, which allows us to track our responders. And that's over there. And I'll just show you on the screen so everyone can see how easy that is to use from there we go. So that's my responder app, and over there I can set my status. And if I set my status, that changes the colors of these dots on the map. But what I'm trying to show you here is that green cloud you're seeing, that's calculating my live travel time using my live traffic services and my current location. Tell me my green cloud there is my 10-minute response window. That's everywhere I can get to in my PSAP. And that orange cloud, that's 15, and the red's 30. So this is the power of native IP. This is when you're using the cloud to make all these calculations for you, and you're just presenting the layer you need when you need it. And again, like taking this data and using that a different way, how do we analyze our workflows? How do we capture our call take, our dispatch, our travel time to scene, our on-scene time? How do we measure that, again, using cloud-based solutions, the best in breed? Like, there was a question, if Google can do it, why can't we? Well, we can. It's just that for whatever reasons that in America, and I'm grateful to be here, I must tell you, but things need to change, and here's how you can measure your service. So if I want to see how my motor vehicle response time looks, I click on motor vehicles. I want to see pedestrians, I can see my mission time on a pedestrian. I want to see how I'm performing against my SLA, I can click on my SLA wheel and go, right, those are the calls I've made within my SLA. Those are my near misses. So this is where I need to focus. Having the information at your fingertips is actually everything, and everybody's got the information on except public safety. It's bizarre. I come from a investment banking background, which explains why I'm aggressive and loud, and I've got some Italian shoes on. But everything else, okay, and I was warned about that when I got you. But I would spend $100,000 to make $110,000 in return. And so the conversation you need to have with your vendor communities, because I can't do 100% of the market, let's be honest, right? So bring them up. Say it's time for them to invest back in their products and spend more money in R&D and less on their booths. Right, so looking at pulling in live weather and what we can do with that, and again, this is very important for predictive analytics. If we put in live weather, we can pull in all kinds of information. So we can start capturing, we snap the weather every 30 minutes for a fire workflow, for example, so I can then go and back test that and work out over a period of time with machine learning or artificial intelligence, what am I doing? But equally, talk about officer safety, right? When we do a traffic stop, we don't make you call and someone's got to run a plate and check what's going on. We push a button on a dash cam that sends a photo into our platform that creates an incident at the XY that pushes the XY into Waze and lets people know there's a vehicle on the side of the road. We then run the plate using artificial intelligence and number plate recognition. We then query NCIC and DMV, and then we query LexisNexis, and then we give the officer the information 10 seconds later when he unclicks his seatbelt and walks out the car with his unholstered weapon about to approach a suspect with 3 warrants. So this is all, none of this is science fiction. I can demonstrate this all to you live after the session. We can talk about this. But the point is, Don't let yourself be shortchanged. That's my little soapbox piece, right? So I'll go back. I'll do a tiny little bit of demo here, Patrick, and then I'll sort of look for the arrows on my back. Okay, so if I just, what I'm going to do, everyone's speaking about location in different ways, and again, we built this platform in Africa. We never realized we could compete. Okay, well, I'm officially out of data, so I'm now going to do an ultimate live demo. I'm going to switch to the data connection on my cell phone to proceed with this part of the demonstration. So there you go. I'm just going to connect to my cell phone data. And that's when we're at the mercy, and there we go. Okay, so I'm going to refresh my site here. So we built this platform without an alley, without a spill. Like, how do we solve for data, right? And so we're very lucky now to have incredible integrations with partners like Rapid SOS and Google ELS, and that's fantastic. But where that's not available, we're in Africa. How do we do it? So we have workflows. We can send a text message straight to a user. They click that. That finds their location and posts it back into the CAD. I can do the same thing with a video stream. I can send that to a text message, any smartphone in the world right now, and pull a live video feed straight into my CAD using mobile data alone. So, so if I just call, make a call here, show you an inbound call on Rapid Deploy, just dialing. There's a screen pop. That's connected to a VoIP PBX. It's all real time and live. Okay, so I go and pull out this phone number here, and I can go start processing that call. And you can see I'm permissioned to have this set in Cape Town. Now, if I can't find this guy, all right, so let me give him a name. Serge, not me. Sorry, I'm typing a bit funny over here. Okay, and I might use a different number. But no, I'll use this number. Okay, sorry, let me go. I'll put a number in over here. And, okay, so all I have right now is I'm permissioned for Cape Town. So I click on a button, send an SMS to them, and that message has been sent. I'm going to receive a text message on my phone, and here it is, and it says, click the following link to share your location. Currently, I'm in Cape Town. Click the link. Confirm your GPS on, yes. Share your location, yes. Taking that off my phone. There we go. So on my phone, it says to me, I'm at 3664 C Street. It's got me a what3 words address, a lat long. If I load the address here, bang, it's found me. That's just using a text message. Okay? We're grateful enough to have an integration with Rapid SOS as well. So if I look over here, I can actually see Rapid SOS has also pulled out a location from my device. And I can just use and choose to load that location instead. And now it's loaded that location. So all these tools are available. And like, this is not, this is not the future, this is the present. We've been live for over 3 years with over 50 implementations around the world. Again, a beauty of cloud implementation. I know that the pain point for every person in public safety and computer-aided dispatch is their 2-year lead time to implement, right? In the cloud, we stand these up in 15 minutes, hot, live, with master data. There's no need to wait 2 years to welcome the future. The future's here. Thank you very much.